I think when a man walks through the door, you believe that he already inherently has the capability to do great things because he's a man, just gets inherently invested in those characteristics. Whereas when a woman comes in the room, you say, I don't know. I don't know if she's capable of doing that. She needs to prove herself. She needs to keep earning the bar and show me that she is worthy of being invested in.
Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech, and thank you for tuning in to episode 160. My name is Dirk Jan Upkes, and this is the podcast that closes the funding gap in venture capital by amplifying the stories of female founders and their investors. Today's episode starts in Bangalore in 1981. A young woman is preparing to go to college in the United States when her father takes her aside and tells her to build her own income, so she won't depend on a husband. Even by today's standards, that's not common advice we give young women, but as you'll learn, it gave my guest the confidence to get her computer science degree, become a female leader in tech, and pass on her father's advice to her daughters. My guest in this episode is Nithya Ruff. She is a tech veteran who has spent more than 30 years building open source programs inside companies like Amazon, Comcast, and SanDisk. She is currently the chair of the Linux Foundation Board. In this episode, Nithya and I have a fascinating discussion about how her upbringing influenced her life and career choices, and we discuss why the funding gap is not about how women pitch, but about who decides if they get the money. By listening, you'll learn how teaching financial independence builds confidence and careers for women in tech, why Nithya argues that more women in VC is key to closing the funding gap, and what opportunities AI is giving women to build tech businesses without having in-depth knowledge of computer code. Plus, you'll learn why open source has more women in leadership positions than regular tech. So when you're ready to discover why the funding gap starts before female founders ever pitch, here's my conversation with Nithya Ruff. Nithya Ruff, good morning. Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. Good to have you on the podcast. You've had a very rich career at, among others, Comcast and Amazon, Linux Foundation, and I want to start when you came to the US, because you were born in India, you came from Bangalore, and you came to the US in the 1980s. I was wondering what it was like for you to walk into a totally different world.
DJ, thank you for welcoming me to the podcast. I think it was completely different than what I had grown up in. If you must remember, Bangalore in those days was a tech town, but was a sleepy town. Less than 1 million people. Today, I think it's like 10, 15 million, and it's like tech center. And I grew up in a very big extended family, tropical town, very protected, sheltered life. My parents drove me everywhere. I had a driver and, things like that. And here I come to the Midwest of the United States in the early 1980s. Imagine it is almost Arctic-like weather, very, very cold, very sparsely populated, less than 500,000 people in the entire state. And the city I've come to from a town of 1 million to a town of 50,000. The education system is very, very different. The college system in India is different than the United States, where you have a quarter system or a semester system. So it was everything. Food. I'm vegetarian, and the Midwest is very meat and potato. And in fact, they don't know what to do with a vegetarian, especially in the 80s. There were no Indian restaurants in the city I came to. There was no Indian grocery stores, hardly any culture. So it was a complete culture shock, I would say.
Yeah. Where did you go? Where in the US did you go?
I went to a small town called Fargo, North Dakota. So even in the US, Fargo, North Dakota is not very well known. People say, I don't know anyone from North Dakota because it's such a small state. But a lot of North Dakota is farming. It's immigrants from Sweden, Norway, Germany. It was actually quite a good place for me to do my computer science degree because sometimes there's nothing to do. So you really focus on your education,
Uh huh.
you focus on your school, and you focus on learning. The isolation, I think, was the thing that I struggled with the most because I was used to people on the streets, a lot of socialization in India, a lot of extended families, events, etc. And then suddenly going to seeing no one on the street, having to build a new community of people and support was challenging. And frankly, I didn't know how to cook. So here I was being vegetarian in a town that didn't really cater to vegetarians, having to feed myself. So I had to learn to cook very, very quickly. And I don't know if a lot of our listeners even can identify with the fact that we had no internet,
Hmm.
we had
Yeah.
no Wi Fi, we had no mobile phones. So the only way to stay in touch with my parents was either the telephone, which was extremely expensive. So every minute was like $3, $4, or writing letters. So here I was writing to my mother to say, help, help, I don't know how to cook. Can you please send me some recipes
Hmm.
that I can make? And then to look for grocery stores where I could find those ingredients.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was about to say because that is another challenge, especially in the 1980s. We're so used to going on to Amazon or here in the Netherlands to Albert Heijn. We can order just about anything online if we want, but that wasn't the case in the 1980s. I think, yeah, if you had lived in New York, maybe there would have been grocery stores that catered to immigrants, but
Indeed, indeed. There was one small natural food store called Tochi's. I still remember them because I could at least get rice, basmati rice. I could get yogurt. I could get cilantro. Um, but I had to actually call up Chicago. There was an Indian grocery store in Chicago, and I'd have to ask them to ship me groceries. And then over the month, they would, send me a shipment of different things that I could cook.
okay, so that was actually, oh, how did you find out about them by
So
chance?
the support system in the university was there were other Indian students.
Mm-hmm.
I became a part of that community, and through those students you would find out how they coped, how they created, their comfort zones within, this country. And there
Mm-hmm.
were professors in the university who were from India who often would invite us to their homes on the weekends or would introduce us to, so here's what you need to do to substitute this for this, or
Mm-hmm.
how you recreate, what you did in India. And so I think in immigration, there are a lot of stories like that of the former generation helping the next generation in moving forward and learning and coping.
It's good at least that the people were there to help you with that, because I can only imagine how lonely it must have been, especially in the first few months there.
Indeed. I went from, uh, 30 to 40 Celsius in India
Yeah.
to the first winter in Fargo was minus, I don't know, 20, 30 Celsius, and snow days, for a long time. So there was even an orientation session for foreign students where they would teach us how to dress, what kind of clothes to buy, what kind of shoes to buy, because you cannot survive in North Dakota if you, dress in tropical wear. Uh,
No.
it,
No, that's not gonna happen, especially not with -20.
indeed, indeed. So that was, I think it built character. It built independence. Um, I'm very grateful actually for this experience because when you're 6,000 miles away from your parents and your support system, you
Hmm.
learn to um, build a new support system. You learn to find resourcefulness in yourself that you never knew you had. You learn to build skills you never had, which then became really helpful in later years for me, or asking for help as well, which I never had. Uh, and kind of growing out of your comfort zone and knowing how to deal with new situations.
Yeah. So your father had a big influence on your life. I think he also supported you on going to the US. I was wondering, because it's not really a, let's say, normal step to take for maybe for at that time, not even normal for Indian people to go to the US, let alone to send a girl alone there. Um, what did he do differently, and how did he build confidence in you that you could actually pull it off?
I think in many successful women's lives, you hear the story of the role their fathers played.
Hmm.
For me, it was definitely the case. My father was an engineer. He started the watch industry in India. He was a pioneer. He had gone to Japan to go to school, so he had experienced, being outside India,
Huh?
uh, and in building his company, he had hired a lot of women managers in his own company, and he recognized the strengths women brought to the table. But I'm sure that that had something to do with it. But I think it was right from the beginning when I was a child. I remember I
Huh?
was never treated like a child. I would be invited into the living room for conversations he would have with his colleagues or visitors from Japan, visitors from Switzerland or France, etc. And he would ask me questions like, "What do you think the significance of the man landing on the moon means?"
Hmm.
Or what do you think is happening in the economy in India? And, things of that nature. So he actually paid attention to what I had to say, what I had to think. And I was involved in these discussions, which I think built confidence and
Hmm.
also really grew my own sense of knowledge and interest in business, in politics, in socialization,
Hmm.
and communities. I think his professional world, he introduced me to successful women at his company, and I would practically go with my parents everywhere. I think it's hard to overstate what that does to a young person. Especially a woman, when the adult person in their life, the adult man, the first adult man in their life, believes in them and treats their mind as important and their opinions as important. I think that carries through with you into every room you go. It gives you that confidence that you matter and your opinions matter,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's important for parents to take that into account, not just open doors for different experiences, but
Hmm.
really pay attention to the opinions and what your kids are saying. That builds confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that it also makes you feel like you matter.
Yes,
So it
yes,
sort of gives you a bit of like responsibility almost or agency
indeed.
to really take that like okay, and now I'm feeling able to take that step also to go to the US.
Absolutely. And I had never thought about the US as a step, as you correctly point out. Even today, when you're about 20, 21 as a young woman in India, the step that parents kind of lead you to is to get married. And then many young women come to the US as wives or as sisters
Mhm.
uh, because there's someone to take care of you and you're protected, etc. But his point to me was I want you to be independent. I want you to have your own income, your own financial standing. I don't want you to depend upon a man for a living. Respect and confidence comes from having financial independence. Um, and, many people kind of laughed at him for sending me alone and felt that I would, go off and do all kinds of bad things. And, my reputation would be spoilt and
Yeah.
I would not be marriageable anymore, etc. But he trusted the fact that that thought that I deserved to live my life fully.
Yeah. That's really powerful. And also going, ev- at the time in India, I suppose going against the normal way of doing things. But even in general, in the time philosophy, it would be, let's say, something that is rare to really tell a woman like, hey, you need to be financially and emotionally independent from men.
Indeed.
I don't know if we raise our girls in general that way now. I think it's getting a bit better, but it's really powerful, especially in the 19, what is it, 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
It was 1981. Uh, I agree. It was so powerful and so different, and I think it gave me a stubbornness, and which is the reason I persisted in doing what I did.
Yeah.
I wanted to prove everybody wrong that I would not fail. I wanted to prove my father right, that he believed in me and that he was the right person. And I also saw what getting my master's degree in computer science would do for me, that it would open doors, that I would have the respect of the world. I could, financially do better. And you'd see a lot of first generation immigrants to the US in particular always did very pragmatic degrees like computer science, engineering, medicine, law,
Hmm.
because they wanted to establish, a financial sound footing for them and their families. Today, my children, of course, are pursuing all kinds of other educations.
Yeah. They also had a, let's say, not so traditional upbringing, I think.
Indeed.
They had a working mom and a stay-at-home dad. Um, so how does that help them? Because your father instilled a lot of, let's say, trust in yourself, self-confidence. Uh, how did that work with your children?
And what ended up happening, so I met my husband at college
Yeah.
and ended up marrying someone from the US. And so that allowed me to stay in the US. And we come from different cultures. He comes from a very German background, and I come from a very Indian background. So our
Uh-huh.
children, first of all, were exposed to lots of different cultures. But as they were very young, we both were working incredibly busy jobs in Silicon Valley, came to the conclusion that one of us needed to stay home and take care of the children. And it so happened that we really dealt with it in a pretty rational way. We compared our strengths and weaknesses as a team, and we always thought of ourselves as a team, and that it was a common portfolio that we were building. Um, and we found that my husband was better at staying home and being disciplined, and he was very dedicated to the children. And I was better at socializing and the politics of workforce and to be able to land on my feet, to be able to find the next job and to
Mhm.
continue kind of progress in my career. So we ended up with my husband staying home and taking care of the kids. But as you correctly point out, it really had a profound impact on the children. I think it both gave them a role model that I was, the breadwinner. I was out there traveling, establishing my career, earning respect, speaking publicly, etc. But that their father was always there for them. He would not be even a minute late in picking them up from school, dropping them off, taking them to swim meets, homework in the evenings, dinner was on the table. It was treated like he called himself the CEO of the home. And he treated it like a job, and he took it seriously. He would
Mhm.
be up at 6 reading the Wall Street Journal. He's a finance guy.
Mhm.
But by 7, breakfast would be on the table, the kids would be ready. So even now, my kids will say it really gave them a sense of, um, I guess it built a very safe environment. It built a very trusting environment. It broke gender norms,
Mhm.
that, anything was possible. Um, One of my daughters is in medicine. She is a physician. The other one runs her own little company. She's in public relations. And both of them are really strong young women. And I attribute a lot of it to their father being home for them.
Yeah. But also having the role model of a working mother, I think is really powerful because there's very few who have that at all. But also, let me put it this way. My mother started working again. She worked before I was born, but she started working again, I think, when I was 8 or so, because by then she felt like I can safely send him to go on his bike to school. Nothing bad won't will happen on the way. So, but yeah, that's for me. Therefore, it was also always normal to have a working mother, but I know that many of the people in especially in the primary school, weren't a lot of women working, and still, that was prompted me to a question I was wondering about. Did your husband ever get remarks like, "Hey, why is your wife not picking up the kids?"
Yes, and also he would get comments like, um, you know, when are you going to find a job? Or are you looking for a job? Or what do you do?
Hmm.
And so we had to come up with a clever way of explaining his role.
Hmm.
And, because stay at home mom was a more common term, but
Yeah.
home dad was not a common term. So he would say, I'm the founder of two startups called Alex and Tara,
Hmm.
which is names of our daughters.
Yeah.
And, and that I'm investing in their lives and their careers. And so I thought that was quite interesting. In the beginning, it was awkward, but as we owned it and we
Hmm.
grew with, this is our life and this is how we run our household, it became more comfortable. And frankly, the financial dynamics also changed when was the breadwinner. Had a lot more say in how the house was run, what investments we made. And often women take a backseat in the financials of a household,
Yeah.
right? And the man typically manages the finances and dictates how things work. So I liked I really liked that dynamic, and I felt I cannot quit my job because it gives me a seat at the table. It gives me a lot more power in this relationship and other relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it gives you a lot of you need power in terms of the decisions that are taken, how decisions are taken, but also I can imagine doing it totally in like almost the flip side of what is normal. Did that sort of from how do you say, from an intelligence point of view, was it sort of felt nice?
It really felt nice. It really felt nice. I know a lot of I grew up with my mother asking my father for the allowance for the household,
Uh-huh.
and he would question if she spent money on, something she wanted or something frivolous. And, she really had to answer to him. And it just felt really good to know, um, hey, I worked hard for this. And if I want to spend it on something, I can. I don't need to answer to somebody else. I was thoughtful about the fact that this is a common pool for the family, but at the same time, I felt the confidence to go off and spend without worrying about being questioned about it. I think that's important. That women are involved in the finances in their family and know where the money comes from, how it's invested, and have a seat at the table. But also that they have independence in making decisions about, how that money is spent.
Yeah. How did you do that towards your husband? Because he was not earning. Was
I
there a sort of a common pool, or did you give him an allowance? How does this work in
it
terms
was
of
a common
dynamic?
it was a common pool, and it was an allowance, and I give my husband so much credit because he never once kind of uh, downplayed himself or felt like he was the underdog. He was right at the table, influencing and making these decisions. Uh, and he never once kind of felt weak because he wasn't the one that was, bringing money. And it's remarkable. I mean, in the same position, a woman often takes a very subservient role,
Yeah.
but he never did. He always showed up fully and as if, he had earned this as well, because he
Hmm.
did. It was, we both had earned it. He was just playing a different role than I was.
Yeah. And also, I think I liked the way he presented it, or you both presented it as a sort of startup that you
Yes,
were running together.
that's right.
So
That's right.
I think that's a really good frame, really nice frame to put it in. And so talking about startups, because part of our conversation will be around the funding gap and around access to innovation. So today, only 2% of VC funding goes to female founders. You have a totally different upbringing and the way you ran your family. And those dynamics have been there. Let's say the number has hovered around 2%, I think, for at least a decade, if not longer. Why don't we see the progress, you think?
It's really ironical because we've been talking about this for years and years and
Yeah.
years. I have been seeing this for the last 25 years at least. I think there's awareness, there's energy around it. There are
Hmm.
lots of panel discussions, there are people talking about it. I think it's a self replicating industry. It is, VCs were built by a relatively homogeneous group, and they invest in people who look like them and who had the same experiences.
Hmm.
VCs always want to say this founder reminds me of myself and what I went through. And I think it's a systematically biased group. And because the feedback loop in VC circles is about 10 years, to see if a company really succeeds, it's
Hmm.
hard to see change quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and frankly, there's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of discussion, but there's very little structural change. There's a very little uh, change in amount of investment that happens, as you point out.
Yeah.
I haven't seen, the structural changes like who are the managing partners, who sits on the investment committees,
Hmm.
the due diligence questions framed. how do they source and create a pool of founders that they want to invest in. And women are often subject to prove yourself, show me, rather than on potential. Men are invested on potential, whereas women, you've got to prove yourself. I think women face a higher bar.
What's
Yeah.
what is the difference between being invested in for potential versus having to prove yourself?
I think when a man walks through the door, you believe that he already inherently has the capability to do great things.
Hmm.
Because
Because he is a man.
because he's a man, just gets inherently invested in those characteristics. Whereas when a woman comes in the room, you say, I don't know. I don't know if she's capable of doing that. She needs to prove herself. She needs to keep earning the bar and show me that she is worthy of, being invested in.
Is that
Uh,
because of a lack of role models, you think?
I think it's structural bias in how we were all brought up. We It is role models, it is archetypes. You don't see those archetypes, but it's also you kind of inherently were taught that women don't do this, women don't do that, and so you cannot believe in it inherently, and so you tend to kind of not want to take a chance, take a risk.
But is it not wanting to or not having the, let's say, the stomach or the ability to stomach the risk?
It's the ability to stomach the risk. Very few want to stick their head out and take the chance and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to invest in this female founder and I'm going to support them and make sure that they succeed. Uh,
So with all the awareness that is out there, also around how women are just perform better in business because those stats are out and have been, I think, proven beyond the last shred of a reasonable doubt that people may have. So why then still, given that there's evidence, given that there's awareness, given that even, or at least maybe that's lip service, but even many big VCs say, okay, well, yeah, women are also have a place in the startup scene. Why then still is there this funding gap there? Uh, is it then a matter of time before that momentum sort of starts to shift?
I hope so. I hope so. I think it goes back to who's at the table making the decisions. That group has not changed.
No.
And until that group changes, I was just looking at some numbers. Um, Only 5% of VC firms overall have a majority of female partners.
Hmm.
But smaller firms seem to be doing better. And some of the newer firms seem to be doing better, things like Natri, or there's another group called Portfolio, who are female funders, female investors, who are looking for female, run companies to invest in, or
Hmm.
diverse companies to invest in. But that's still such a small, small group. And
Hmm.
until the people sitting at the table who are making those funding decision changes, I think it will continue to be. Um, it's not a pipeline issue, as you point out.
No.
We've got plenty of people who are, startup founders. It is it is a funding issue. It is people who are funding, not doing the funding.
Okay, so how do we change that?
Um,
Because there's awareness, there's a pipeline, there's let's say growing, there's the evidence that it can work.
I think it's changing the number of female partners in venture funds, starting more venture funds like Natri and Portfolio and etc., which have a thesis around um, women funders and teaching women how to become VCs, how to become investors, how to gauge companies that they invest in. I think it's starting even earlier, right? Upstream. There's a saying in the US now with the baby boom generation,
Hmm.
being having some of the biggest wealth in the country and also the biggest wealth transfer happening to women. Uh, and women having a lot of wealth and also purchasing decisions. I think we need to help women become investors and become VCs and start, the pipeline, start funding right from the beginning.
So then it is a pipeline issue, but not on the startup end, but on the investor end.
Correct, correct. We need more female investors. We need more female funders. We need more female VCs and partners who can change the way we look at funding decisions and startups and invest in startups that are female led or have female teams.
Yeah, I agree that this will be of huge help because also one of the things that men run into is a lack of, especially when you talk about women's health, it's a lack of lived experience. We
Yes,
just don't know what menstruation is like. We just don't know what menopause is like. We will never know, or from having experienced it ourselves. Um, so having women on the other side of the table who do know, who do understand, will definitely help also in making it possible for investors to invest in those cases.
exactly. Exactly. If you look at the portfolios of some of these companies, of some of these funders like Portfolio, they're investing in issues that matter to women, uh, and which was so underinvested in for the longest time,
Yeah,
uh, right? And
and still is.
it still is. It still is. We still test drugs on men, or and not on children, not on women, and we don't invest in issues that matter to women, parenting, women's health, etc., etc. So I think it's going to change a lot of things if women can channel their money into investments and start taking those types of, being bold. I started angel investing only in the last 10, 15 years. Uh, Nobody told me that this was something that was interesting and exciting to do, or that I could do it, or that I could take a chance. And I am so grateful that I am part of 2 investing communities.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
So what drew you into the investment communities that you're part of?
I, am part of 2, funds. One is the Nithya Futures Fund, which is a South Asian group, and, it's a community and an ecosystem builder for
Hmm.
South Asian women. So the whole premise was, uh, exactly as we talked, that a lot of us don't invest and don't, become VCs and don't participate in the whole process of how funding happens, how decisions happen, and change that right from the beginning. And so this was an empowerment fund. It was a small amount, but it was important. And all of us both advise these companies. We also participate in how we select these companies, and we participate in funding. Um, Other group is called NEO, and it was funded back in 2017 by an Iranian immigrant to the United States called Ali Partovi. He and his brother founded code.org and worked on democratizing computer science education in the world. And he backs people rather than just ideas or markets. So he invests early. He invests in students at universities who have potential, and then works with them as mentors, with industry mentors like myself, and they get a chance to be working in startups during their, intern years, and eventually they join startups and the fund invests in startups that they join. So it's an ecosystem, it's a student investment, it's fund, and the fund is done extremely well,
Yeah.
and it's invested in companies like Cursor and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's
that's
a
a
good name right now to be
exactly.
in.
And I really think both of these funds taught me that it's not just about investing, it's about support systems, ecosystems, believing in your thesis, and putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always important, both as a man and as a woman, of course. Um, so there was one thing that I remember from our previous conversation is we talked about okay, how do you then select these people that get to go on universities, and there would be pitch nights, which would then primarily be joined by men.
Yes.
Uh, how d Because that sort of prompts back to a pipeline issue. Maybe not in terms of demand later or supply later on, but at least early on, many women choose, let's say, the safe path, the corporate path, and only later start doing entrepreneurial things because for some reason it didn't work out in corporate. So, how do we um, make? No, let me ask one question first. Why should women choose that startup path earlier?
And Neo does this extremely well. They choose people in universities, both men and women, people from diverse backgrounds, and encourage them to go into startups, because the safe path is always companies, right? They're on campus, they're recruiting, Amazon, Google, etc. I think the speed of learning, what you learn in 6 months at a startup is incredible. You to do a broader role, you get to do touch a lot of different areas. You're not pigeonholed into one small, segment, whether you're in coding or marketing. Your role is very, very broad. When I was part of startups, I did everything from product management all the way to public relations, website, going to events. Um, I wrote, my first MRD and PRD for the company, the product requirements document. I went and talked to the first customers. You just don't get to do that in large companies. You're so
Yeah.
far removed from, where the customer is. The second is there's ownership, both financial ownership, and you get equity in the company in form of stock, but you also have a lot of psychological ownership. You just feel that your work determines the success of the company, and you can see it. You can see it the next day. What you do shows up.
Yeah. So
Uh,
the impact is more direct.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you can also shape the culture from scratch. Especially, I was part of a startup that was 20 people, and you really could talk to every single person. You could set the stage on how you ran the meetings. You could set the stage on how you promoted or how you taught someone. Um, in large companies, sometimes it's very, very difficult to change the culture or to feel like you belong, when you are different than, what the culture is. And yes, it's the corporate companies seem like the safe path, but frankly, if you look at what's happened in the last few years, it's not. It's lot of layoffs, a lot of change, constant, org changes, and they're not as stable as we once thought, where in my father's days, you started as a young man in a company and you retired with a watch, 20 or 30
Yeah.
years later. It doesn't happen. And yes, the risk in the startup is there, but it's visible, but there are also rewards. And yeah, yes,
Yeah,
they
and
don't.
also it gives you the opportunity to uh, you see the impact that you make on a daily basis, but it also gives you the opportunity to fail and then learn from it.
Yes, yes. And in many of the startups I was in, I was just 1 degree removed from the CEO, 1 or 2 degrees. I got to present to the board, got to meet with the investors. I had a role as VP of marketing, so I had an opportunity to really grow up fast. I never would have the opportunity in a very large company to pitch to the board or to, talk to the CEO on a regular basis. And you grow up fast and you also learn fast of what matters and how companies are shaped and grown and, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when we spoke before, you said that many women move f- eventually move into entrepreneurship because they can build the life that they want or need, often around flexibility, often around at least being able to work at times that it works for them. So they can mold it around their other duties. Um, how does a startup fit into that? Is that assumption really true? Does it hold true that you can actually mold your work around whatever life you're living, or is there still sort of the requirement implicitly to work at least a considerable number of hours to be successful?
I mean, startup is hard work. It's
Yeah,
for sure, it's hard work, right? However, you can set the rules on how you want to run it. Do you want to be a remote company or do you want to be in-person company? Which is a big, big discussion right now,
yeah.
right? Do you want to really reward people based on the hours worked, or do you want to reward them on outcomes and impact? Um, how do you want to build a culture? How do you want to recruit? And by the way, parenting is gender neutral. Men and women both share a role in parenting, and yet the majority of the burden always falls on a woman. So, how can you make parent friendly companies? And today's companies, large companies to me, are still industrial age artifacts. They are 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, physical space, which is not necessary in a world where you have AI, you have the internet, you have motivated people. So I think you can build those types of characteristics in the culture that you want to find. Women are also very good at reaching out and asking for help, building support systems, building communities. So the lonely life of a startup founder is less lonely when women can, uh, work with other women, work with other teams, and frankly, create a support system for themselves. Yes, it is going to continue to be hard work, but to be honest with you, life and work gets integrated together rather than compartmentalized into 8 to 5 is work and 5 to 8 again is life. You
Does
can,
that make it easier, you think? That it's
yes,
sort of integrated?
yes, I think so. I think so. I know a lot of women who um, started companies with small children. The children would go to work with them and they would do meetings at certain times and you could control how you ran the meetings and how you kind of integrated life and work into your work. And that I think is a more evolved way of running organizations. Yes, there is time when collaboration is important and you need to be in the same space or you need to have people together. Open source, frankly, has taught me a lot about how remote and global and teams who don't belong to the same organization can work together without being physically together.
Can you double click on that?
I can. The very nature of open source is asynchronous and offline, uh, because the people who contribute to the project can be anywhere in the world.
Hmm.
They are coming to the project because they believe in the project and they believe in the problem that the project is solving. They have a sense of alignment with the mission.
Hmm.
And open source has historically used mailing list, Slack, offline, conversations to make decisions, to accept um, contributions, to review contributions, and to frankly document decisions made. So every time a decision is made in open source, it is shared in an online format, in a written format, and people are given 24 hours to 36 hours to read it and vote on it or to weigh in on it and to have a discussion around it and then to move forward, which then really allows people to participate no matter where they are and at what time or time zone they are. They don't have to jump on a call at 5 a.m. in the morning to make a decision. They can think about it, they can look at it, and then make a decision.
Yeah.
And
And
all of
also,
the
if they're, let's say, a bit behind the curve in terms of the time zone, they have the benefit of seeing the whole debate
exactly,
develop before their eyes, and they can read into, like, is my question dealt with, yes or no, or is
yes,
my objection dealt with, yes or no. That's always what I found really. I never worked with open source myself, but what I always found really easy about Slack and that technologies like that, if you're, let's say, if you join a bit late, you actually get to see the whole debate
yes.
unfold in front of your eyes.
It's fantastic. And when you look at commits on GitHub or other collaborative tools, it is documented what I submitted, what feedback I got, what review, how I made the corrections. So it is transparent, it is democratic, it is inclusive, it is remote. It include it's and there are small steps to enter open source. You don't have to prove yourself or meet a certain bar in order to enter. You can start by just joining the mailing list and then maybe making a comment, maybe submitting a small change to the documentation, and then it goes into perhaps you volunteer to run the community or
Mhm.
do a community day. And so you build up your credentials and the trust, and you earn trust through the amount of work you do over the years.
Yeah, how does that help? Um, because you work for a couple of organizations like Linux, and you mentioned a few other Rust and Apache and Python, I think also that have female leadership. How does this sort of democratic, uh, for lack of a better word, hybrid setup, how does it enable female leadership then?
I think one is um, it's a meritocracy.
Hmm.
So you are you earn your way into these organizations. Um, for instance, the person who runs the Apache Software Foundation, president of the Apache Software Foundation, she's been volunteering with the foundation for years, in a marketing role, in setting up events, in writing blog posts.
Hmm.
She got a journalism background. She's not a coder. She didn't do code contributions, but her contributions helped her, slowly kind of be the secretary, then the vice president, and then the president of the Apache Software Foundation. Because of her contributions, she's earned the respect and also knowledge of the organization. And so also, I mean, if you look at all the leadership of Python, Rust, Apache, my role as chair of the Linux Foundation, we all started out as small contributors, attenders at the meeting, and then, helping with governance, helping with other type of issues, volunteering, setting up um, things for the organization. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. You don't have to do code contribution to be a leader of these organizations. In fact, all of these leaders came from either journalism, nonprofit leadership. I came from product marketing and product management, and so on and so forth, and are leaders of some of the organizations shaping how software is developed in the world today.
That's That's good news also for women in leadership, also in tech. I was wondering how you look at AI because we are seeing a couple of developments. One was hybrid, and that came with COVID, of course, but also the AI has developed. Has undergone a huge development over the past years. Um, how do you see it make entrepreneurship more accessible to women, for instance, or people who don't have an entrepreneurial or do not have a coding background?
I mean, all of a sudden, all of us can be builders. All of us can create prototypes, can create applications. If you have a domain knowledge, if you have an expertise in a certain area, if you have an idea, you can actually create things yourself. You don't have to have a big software development team. You don't have to go talk to your engineering team and try to convince them that they need to work on this project. And then with the prototype, you can actually go and either raise money or um, demonstrate the viability of the idea. um, it's an incredible uh, world where the code barrier is dissolving, and the need to, this special skill, this priesthood of software development is kind of dissolving.
Do
You
you
can
also see that in the investment space, like that you as a result see more female founders because AI has democratized how we build software?
I hope so. I hope so. The challenge has been you're not seeing as many women jumping into AI as I would like to see.
Hmm.
Uh, I think women are either skeptical or not jumping in as much as, men are. In AI, you're seeing um, very few women participating, and that needs to change. And they need to know that this is a tool to express their ideas, um, like no other tool in history. You know, and so
Is that a matter of education? Or how do we change that? Because that is some. I agree. Yeah, that it's the opportunity, literally of a lifetime, for women to change the course of how technology is shaped, but also in terms of biases. Because I think at least maybe that's a good question also to run by you. I think that uh, women are told or talked out of contributing to AI. That's how I see it because of basically one is private reason is privacy, and the other one is yeah, well, it's bias. So it's they first need to fix the bias, and then it's safe for you. And I'm like, well, the bias isn't going to change unless you go in.
participate. Exactly, exactly. I've been talking about AI needing to be more open,
Hmm?
open source,
Yeah.
where the There is open, the models are open, where we understand how it was trained in order to then modify any biases, any structural changes that it has. Without transparency, without knowing, how it was trained, it's hard to. And today, this it's very opaque. And you're exactly right. The way to make change happen is to jump in, and is to actually uh, be part of changing how AI, to reduce the bias in AI, frankly, because it's been trained on historical data, which has had a lot of bias built in. And if a lot of the makers, a lot of the builders are people of a certain, experience and certain life, they will bring that life and bias into the equation. And you need more builders that come from other backgrounds and other life experiences. So, how to change it? I think we need to invest in showing that this is not scary, this is not bad. This is a tool to use in fashion, in design, in public relations and medicine, in areas that women care about, and that they can accelerate idea to creation much faster than they could, and they don't need to have a technical founder next to them or an army of engineers that they can, who don't, by the way, trust their idea or believe in their idea, and who often are skeptical and push back.
Mhm.
Now they can actually make that happen. So I think it's very empowering. I'd like to see more incubators, VCs encourage women founders to, and frankly, anyone with an idea to go out and play with it. Maybe hackathons, maybe um, you know, events like that. I can see in a liberal arts school introducing AI as a tool. How do you take what you did in philosophy and make it come to life, or in theology, or in ancient history, or even in writing? What are some of the things we can do here to make it easier?
So you use AI tools like Claude yourself, even also to organize and run your professional life. Can you name a couple of ways that female founders or male founders, for that matter, can really start using AI to save time or make better decisions?
Yeah, yeah. When I left a large company and became an independent entrepreneur, founder, consultant, board member, etc., I realized that I no longer had access to my executive assistant. I did
Mhm.
not have access to the research and, all of the other stuff that companies provide you, right? The scaffolding that they provide you.
Mhm.
So what I've been doing is all of my research and synthesis of my thinking and writing, I do on Claude Cowork. Um, it's amazing how to use again Claude as a debate partner to test your ideas, to kind of say, take this idea and pretend that I'm pitching to an executive of a company, or I'm pitching to leadership in this organization, and give me feedback on whether my idea is sound or where I need to strengthen this idea, right? And I'd write all my first drafts of posts, emails to key people, uh, presentations, even preparation for this call. I worked with Claude Cowork to help me kind of structure my presentation, have citations, have research that I could use, pull together my story, um, meeting, prep. I'm also using it right now to help my daughter plan her wedding. She is getting married next year, and so
Congratulations.
thank you. So we are using Claude to say what venues, if I have this kind of budget and if I have this kind of, atmosphere I want to create, what are the venues that we can look at, and where should we go have the wedding? And so I think founders, I've talked to some VC companies who are saying that they want to use it to evaluate incoming pitch decks.
Hmm.
Um, and frankly, you can strengthen your pitch deck also by saying, okay, if I'm pitching to this company, how should I strengthen this pitch deck? What do they look for? What are the biases? What are the questions that the general partners here tend to ask? What's their historical record of how they evaluate, startups? So I think there's a lot that you can do using AI. Frankly, it's take out the mundane stuff that you do, and it's given me a lot more energy to do a lot more.
Yeah, yeah. I was a bit surprised about the prompt you did, or the way you discussed. Okay, you can actually uh, ask Claude to review the pitch deck, and then I'm pitching to this VC. What is he or she going to give me back? What kind of questions? Uh, Let me come back to that in a minute. Um, One question I was still having is, you worked with a lot of startups in your life, open source, also large tech companies. What is one thing that early stage founders consistently underestimate when they build a company?
I think
Did you use Claude to
answer that question.
question?
Let me see what Claude said. I'm going to look at my notes to see what Claude said and what I said. I think it's more. I remember that a lot of startups um, underestimate the go-to-market piece. They tend to, build, and they think that people will come, and they're so insular about the idea that they haven't done enough testing, enough talking to potential customers. So distribution is important. You've got to invest in how is it going to market, and who's the customer, what are the paths to, market, etc. The second is talking to customers, and especially the first 10 customers. I remember working for this small startup. I had a spreadsheet of potential customers, and I would call them and I would talk to them, and I would try to get to the next meeting where I could at least demo the tool
Hmm.
and get feedback. And, even if it didn't result in a sale or a beta test, I got incredibly valuable feedback. And I think we underestimate that. The other thing we underestimate is the emotional toll of starting a company and not having a support system around you,
Hmm.
right? And how it's important to build a community that helps you and supports you. Your investors should be supporting you and investing in you, but also you need to build a support system of peer founders, perhaps of people who have done the same thing, and go out and don't just I have to force myself now that I'm an independent consultant is to go out, and I make meetings happen every week and go talk to people and go, find ideas and test things. And last thing is it takes a long time for things to happen,
Hmm.
whether hiring or go to market planning or funding, and you've got to just be ready for it emotionally and physically and financially, frankly.
Yeah. What does open source teach you in that respect? Are there specific go-to-market strategies that they have, or community building strategies? I think community is sort of an essential element for open source.
One of the things about open source I think that I love is that it is transparent, contributions are visible, everything is attributed and public, which just, you know, founders, I think, could create something similar, a recognition system, perhaps, or, you know, documenting things is the other one. We Because we are remote, we work virtually. GitLab talks about the fact that in its early days, it started documenting how the company is run, how it's structured, how how they would work remotely, and they keep evolving that documentation because it becomes a history of that company and its philosophy and how it works.
Hmm.
Um, I think there's a lower entry point in open source. You can start off by just showing up at an event or just showing up on a mailing list and then working your way through becoming a leader. And often, community building founders should really work to do a 10-minute pitch or have an open forum where they can invite people to come talk to them, explain the idea, but also maybe it's a potential hiring area for them. Um, I think governance is another important element of open source because we don't have an HR department, we don't have, structure. We need to have clear governance on how decisions are made, and it really goes back to documenting. How can startups establish clear rules and policies on how they're going to operate, how their culture is going to evolve, and document that.
How do you keep the flexibility there? Because startups are small organizations that sort of grow over time and that evolve over time. How do you, on the one hand, keep the culture fixed on what you want to have versus give it the flexibility in the governance to sort of grow?
What I learned at Amazon is the leadership principles are what was interesting there from a culture perspective. It's documenting principles rather than absolute, this is what we'll do, this is what we want to. It's saying, these are the tenets by which we operate, these are the principles by which we operate, and then testing decisions, testing changes to those principles. Does that principle still hold, or should we change that principle? Or uh, can we, do we need a new principle that needs to come in?
Hmm.
um, as we grow, because now AI is a key component. Should we introduce transparency, or how we, prioritize humans first versus agents, and things of that sort. So I think it's starting with principles and then testing it along the way to see if it stands the test of the scale of the company, where it is, and how it wants to function the changed circumstances.
That sounds like a great place to go back to the discussion we had on Claude.
Yes.
Especially that prompt you mentioned, like screen this pitch deck. I'm pitching to Mark Andreessen tomorrow. This is my pitch deck. Tell me what he will tell me. I'm building something similar, not with Mark Andreessen in mind, to be honest, but it's called fundingcoach.ai. Its purpose is to help female founders navigate the bias, especially that they will encounter as part of their pitching for funding, and also hopefully improve pitches and over time connect them with investors. So, as I said in the beginning, you've been around in tech and working for large and small enterprises for all of your life. What is one thing that I need to get right to make this tool do what it's supposed to do, which is close the funding gap?
That's a really good question, by the way. I love the fact that you're doing that. And I'm looking for what I had prepared before. I wonder if it can be trained on different venture thesis and how different, venture funds look at funding, um, and what their historical record is, such that it can help customize your funding deck and your approach better, more, streamlined. One of the things AI should do for us is personalization and really hyper custom to, what that situation is. Um, so that's something that I think are really is going to be really wonderful. Uh, and that will show the bias as well.
Yeah, currently it's trained on the what is it, 150 something episodes that are out now. Uh, There are some VCs in there, but it's more trained to look at stage and vertical than it necessarily looks at individual VCs. But I think that's a very good way also then to build that second part, which is the connection with investors, because then you can preempt the bias, but also have a warm link with those investors. So actually that knife cuts on two sides.
I'd love to see more transparency on which investors are investing in women, who are not, who are talking about it but not actually acting on it, how much money is flowing or not.
Yeah, that would be great for sure. It's not something, let me put it this way, all of the investors I speak to actually do invest in women, because with the exception of one of the guests, they are all women. So by nature, their investment portfolio is more diverse. So
Yeah, yeah. I have not started a company. I've started a consulting or group, which is different, and I'm not needed investment. But as if I were starting a company, I'd wonder where do I go to? Who do I go to? Who is investing in, you know, areas that I'm interested in, or who has uh, historically, been a friendly investor to women and who provide a community, who provide, ecosystem, etc. So I don't know if your tool kind of brings that sort of knowledge to the table.
not yet, but that's something then that needs to be built.
Yes. Yes.
One more question. I was thinking about that this morning. Which do you think is more important? The fact that it's AI doing a lot at the back end, or the human component, which is, yeah, basically I do curate a lot of the both on the prompting end, but also on the, let's say, the relationship, and I want to really make it a curated community. Which do you think would be more appealing?
The curated community is very, very important, I think, because it's very lonely being a founder. It's
Mhm.
very lonely. It's hard to find the right place to get funding. A lot of open source founders, for example, when I was in Paris, said ideology of open source is so important to the culture of that company, and you need to find funders and exits that appreciate that and support that and not change the culture of it, right? Um, and so I think creating that community is very important. Clearly, you need to use AI in the back end. Absolutely, you
Mhm.
need. But that then helps you focus on the human element of funding and investing and creating startups more. Today, I think funders spend far too much time on the back end, so they don't have enough time on the human side. So if you take away that burden, hopefully it creates more meaningful relationships.
That sounds like a great place to close. Nithya Ruff, thank you very much for an amazing conversation. Also, thank you very much for the advice you've given me on the tool. If people would like to learn more about you or connect with you, where would you like to send them?
The place where I spend a lot of time, especially professionally, is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I do posts and stories, and I amplify areas that I believe in. I do a lot of personal stories on Substack. Those are the two communities that I believe in, stay in. And you can see a lot of my former previous podcasts or YouTube interviews, etc. If you Google my name.
And that's Nithya with a Y towards the end.
Correct.
Um, so Nithya Ruff will include those links in the show notes, of course. Thank you very much for an amazing conversation. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. And until the next episode, as always, keep being awesome. Well, that's it. Thank you for listening to episode 160 of Women Disrupting Tech, titled Why the Funding Gap Starts Before Female Founders Ever Pitch, with Nithya Ruff. Nithya and I hope you found our conversation as inspiring and informative as we intended it to be. And if you have any questions for Nithya, please drop them in the comments on Spotify, YouTube, and/or Apple Podcasts. You can also use the comments to suggest guests that I should interview on the show. If you want to connect with Nithya, please check out the links in the show notes. As usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog and on my Substack via the links in the caption. There you can also find the link to Nithya's Substack and to my new fundingcoach.ai tool. If you found this episode useful, please take a moment to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and/or YouTube. And if you don't follow us yet, please hit follow or subscribe so you never miss a future episode. Every week, you'll hear how another founder or investor is working to close the funding gap, one conversation at a time. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope to see you in the next episode, and until then, as always, keep being awesome.